Hi, this is Jesse Benelli from the Envu Green Solutions Team, and today I'd like to share some of the latest research we have done with Tetrino on annual bluegrass weevil management. So annual bluegrass weevils, or ABWs, 50 years ago they were considered a new and emerging insect pest. And what's kind of interesting is, now we're in 2024 and it continues to be a new and emerging insect pest. The reason for that is these things are spreading. Their range is increasing almost each year. Where 50 plus years ago it was primarily contained in the mid-Atlantic to the northeast states, we now see these throughout the Midwest, upper transition zone. It's now in Arkansas and in some of these southern states. So the range of the ABWs are rapidly expanding, and it's becoming a very pain to manage, especially if you don't have a lot of experience with it. One of the things I'd like to point out is identification of ABWs is critical, especially if you're in one of these fringe states that's not used to seeing them. You really have to pay close attention to make sure you're correctly identifying them. And I say that is because there's a lot of different weevils out there. There's a lot of different bill bugs out there, and only a small percentage of them are actually turf pests. The other ones just go about their business. So pay close attention to it. If you need to reach out and get a second opinion, please do so, but identification is very important for managing ABW. That's really step one. So what's the abbreviated life cycle for ABWs? Well, they start off as the adults. And this is an adult ABW. In this case, he's just sitting on some type of a cart path. One of the things I want to point out about the adults is they all have this snout. Weevils, bill bugs, they have this snout. With the ABW, it tends to be a lot shorter than what you would find with a hunting bill bug, for example. They are relatively small, by the way, as well. So these adults, in early spring, when temperatures warms up, the sun is out, these adults will start to move away from their overwintering sites. They love tree lines. They love bushes. That's where they'll spend those winter months. But as it warms, they will come out. And then what do? It's mating season, which is happening in early spring. And what happens after that process? Well, egg laying. And you'll see these adults hit peak adult densities, typically when forsythia is half gold and half green. Egg laying is going to follow shortly thereafter. And typically one of the phenological indicators would be when those flowering dogwoods are in full bloom. Now, sometimes these adults will pierce a hole directly in the stem, and then the egg will be inside the plant itself. Other times, they'll just put it right in that first layer of the sheath. And when they put it right there, you can actually see that if you have a high-powered hand lens. And so what happens next? Well, those eggs mature, and then they hatch, and then a early instar ABW larva will emerge. So one of the things about bill bugs and weevils is that they are boring insects. That's what they love to do, and that's what they do to the annual bluegrass plant. They hatch, and they're kind of protected within the stem sheath area, and they will just start feeding in a little line and just burrow through that plant. Now, this particular plant likely won't survive this. And you may see a little bit of damage at this point, but most likely not. The damage, when widespread damage occurs, is when these little things get too chubby, they need a little bit more breathing room, so to speak, and they fall to the soil surface and start feeding on all of those different roots. So when that typically happens, you can use a phenological indicator, when those rhododendrons are in full bloom. That's when these larval populations, you'll be able to start seeing them in that soil. And damage is absolutely warranted. The photo on the left is the perimeter of a fairway, a photo taken by Dr. Ben McGraw at Penn State University. And then this photo that is also taken on a perimeter of a golf course fairway. And you'll see a lot of that early damage because, again, they tend to overwinter in these sites, and they'll lay eggs as soon as they find a nice spot. Identification is important. I bring this up because this picture was taken outside of Montreal, and the superintendent at first thought it was Pythium blight that was causing this sudden collapse of turf. But if you stick a knife in the ground, you'll tend to see these individual larvae in the soil. And so the control is definitely warranted, and Tetrino could comprise of a nice fit in your ABW management program. You know, Tetrino is still a relatively newer insecticide that we launched. And kind of rewinding the clock, when we were doing some of this early development research, you know, one of the things we wanted to look at was ABWs. We wanted to look at grubs, we wanted to look at chinch bugs, bill bugs, caterpillars, and absolutely ABW. And we were very pleased with the level of control that we were seeing from tetraniliprole, which is the active ingredient in Tetrino. So this became Tetrino. And if we look at what this chart is showing, we're seeing a lot of ABW larvae in the non-treated, well over 200 per square foot. That is above any threshold you would ever read online. And then we also wanted to evaluate tetraniliprole, which is a diamide insecticide, against the other diamide insecticides on the market. For example, acelepryn and ferrins. And tetraniliprole performed very, very well, even against ferrins. You know, where I've seen acelepryn work on ABW is when it's in a program and you put something down that's effective immediately before and immediately after that acelepryn application. But we're very pleased with what we saw with tetraniliprole, especially at these different timings. You know, with ABW, typically you have to zone in on certain timings to hit the sweet spot. We thought we had a little flexibility here with this early research, and that was something we wanted to look at again. So after we launched Tetrino, we continue to do some of this research. We peel back the onion on some of the questions that we hear from all of you. So when is the best time to apply Tetrino for ABW? To answer that question, we conducted a study with Steve McDonald in Spring City, Pennsylvania. Again, his site had a lot of ABWs, about 160 per square foot. And we evaluated Tetrino at all of these different timings, beginning with April 3rd and going every 2 weeks. And what we see here is, regardless of application timing, we were able to effectively control ABW. I was a little surprised at how well Tetrino performed as early as April 3. Now, these dates shouldn't really mean anything to you because each year is different. So I did some reverse engineering and calculated what were the growing degree days, base 50, at all of these application dates. And when I was based in Ontario, I always liked Tetrino as that larvicide application when growing degree days base 50 was somewhere in that 200 to 400 range, give or take. And so what we saw with this early application made on April 3rd was we only had 36 growing degree days base 50. We see a little bit, there's some in there, but this is still 85-90% control at this early application. And then we essentially flatlined all populations of ABW on all subsequent application dates. Flatlining ABW like this is very difficult to do, but that is one of the strengths of Tetrino. The other question that we wanted to answer is, so you applied Tetrino, you put it down, what's the next step? How soon after application do I need to irrigate the product in? So to answer this question, we designed a trial looking at Tetrino applied at 2 different carrier volumes. So Tetrino 32 fluid ounces applied at 1 gallon per 1,000 carrier volume. And again, Tetrino at 32 fluid ounces applied at 2 gallons per 1,000. So all of these treatments here at the bottom is Tetrino at 32 fluid ounces. With these blue bars, it's Tetrino at 1 gallon per 1,000 carrier volume. And what we saw is whether you irrigated immediately, which is 0 hours, or irrigated 2, 12, 24, or even 48 hours after application, we still had really good control. And that trend continued when you bumped up your carrier volume to 2 gallons per 1,000. Now, having said that, if you pull me aside at a conference and say, Jesse, when would you like Tetrino to be watered in for ABW? I would like it to be watered in as soon as possible. But the story here is that you have that flexibility. I understand that when these applications are made, which could be April, May, even June, depending on your location, that you may not want to immediately apply additional water to the course for whatever reason. Results from this study suggest that you have that flexibility. So looking at ABW management across an entire season, this is a graph that was modified from Dr. Koppenhofer at Rutgers University. What this shows is the seasonal trends in your adult populations, your young instar larva populations, and late instar larva populations. And essentially, we tend to have 2 peaks each year, both with adults and with the larvae themselves. And then the damage tends to come shortly after the larvae reach peak population. In most years, damage is more severe from the first generation of ABWs compared to the second generation. But that is not always the case. Damage from ABW is kind of dependent on a couple of different things. One, the higher your larvae population is, the more likely you are to see damage. But what it really takes is some environmental stress to really get that damage and get that feeding to really express themselves as symptoms. So where do I like applications of Tetrino? Well, for the first generation ABW, right when the larvae start to enter the soil for first generation ABW. And then you'll need a second application of Tetrino that would likely be made anywhere from late June into July, depending on location. Okay, and there's some benefits in using Tetrino. It's like, yes, during these times, let's just pretend our primary target is ABW. But what else do you get? When you apply it for first generation ABWs, well, that same application also counts as an application for cutworms or bill bugs. The timing lines up pretty well. And when you apply Tetrino for second generation ABW control, now we're in that white grub season. We have long agreed with the industry experts that with white grubs, apply it when you're starting to see the adults, not way early in the season. And so it's during this time we're starting to see the adult beetles, so it's also your white grub application. And it's also for chinch bugs and getting a head start on your fall armyworm management programs. And at Envu, we have designed a couple of different ABW management programs based on your needs at your specific property, and broke it down into a good, better, and best. All programs feature Tetrino applied for first generation ABW larvae and second generation ABW larvae. Now, if your site experiences really high populations of ABW and you really want to get on top of it, then you can make an adulticide application or an application just targeting those adults. And with that, you can use a pyrethroid if they still work on your property, or an insect PGR, followed by the Tetrino. This better program isn't really different from the best program, only that we're recommending Dilox to be applied 2 to 3 weeks after that Tetrino application. What I like about that is anything that's possibly escaping from that application, we're cleaning up, plus it's a different mode of action within a program. So thank you for watching. And again, this is Jesse Benelli from the Envu Green Solutions Team. And stay with us for updates as we receive them.